There is a single ridge of mountains, barely 300 miles long, that holds more of the world's tallest peaks than anywhere else on Earth. This is the Karakoram. Four of the 14 highest mountains on the planet stand here, clustered so tightly that from one spot on the ice you can see them all at once, including K2, the second highest mountain in the world, and the one climbers fear most. About 1 in 4 who reach its summit never make it back down. Between those peaks run rivers of ice 40 miles long, among the longest found anywhere outside the poles. The land climbs 3 vertical miles in the space of a few. The name itself means black gravel, and the rock lives up to it. Dark stone, sharpened by ice into towers that look less like mountains than the ruins of some vast cathedral. Almost no one in America has ever stood here. Most never will. And yet people do live in this place, not at the edge of it, deep inside it, in villages glued to vertical cliffs where a single wrong step is a fall of thousands of feet. They carved their fields out of bare rock and taught glacier water to climb the mountain to their doors. Almost a century ago, America decided a valley this perfect had to be invented and borrowed a name for it out of a novel. Shangri-La. A great many people believed it was this one. It was always real. Stay with me, and by the end you'll understand why the people who live up here wouldn't trade it for anywhere on Earth. Up here, almost nothing comes easy, and almost nothing goes to waste. You see it most clearly at the end of the day, when the cooking starts. In these villages, feeding someone is how you tell them they belong. As the light drops behind the peaks, the smell of rice and jaggery, blocks of raw sugar melted down into a dark caramel syrup, drifts from one rooftop to the next, until the whole hillside knows that supper has begun. Most of what reaches the table was coaxed out of ground that had no business growing anything. Apricot trees press right up against the houses, and nothing from them is wasted. The fruit eaten fresh, dried on the roofs for winter, boiled into paste, even the pits cracked open and pressed for oil. On feast nights there's diram fiti, a sweet bread of sprouted wheat dipped in that same apricot oil. And chapshuro, a flatbread stuffed with meat and sealed over the fire. And then there are the pine nuts. Every autumn the men climb the tallest chilgoza pines in the valley, the most dangerous harvest there is. Balancing out on thin branches to cut down the heavy cones. A good haul can carry a household clear through the worst weeks of winter. But the old folks will tell you that you must never eat the first nut by yourself. That first handful gets passed around the room. A small wordless way of promising that no one here is ever left out. It's why the people here will tell you they wouldn't trade this place for anywhere on Earth. And you're about to see why. A road the world calls the Eighth Wonder, a yak rodeo on a frozen pass, black stone towers that catch fire at sunset, and over all of it, the deadliest of the great peaks. High in the Karakoram, entire villages cling to near vertical slopes where a single misstep could send you thousands of feet down. This is Hunza Valley, a place where snow peaks tower over narrow ribbons of green carved between rock and ice. Above the valley floor, stone forts rise like watchtowers, guarding routes once used by traders who crossed some of the most dangerous passes on Earth. Glaciers creep close to homes here, sometimes groaning at night, while the ground beneath them is never fully at rest. In nearby cliffs, stories persist of spirits said to wander after dark, blamed for sudden rockfalls or strange lights flickering high above the trails. Life here depends on an ingenious system, thin channels cut by hand that carry icy glacier water across miles of bare rock. These channels feed terraces stacked like staircases, each one no wider than a small room, yet capable of growing enough food to sustain a family. Homes are built tightly together along these ledges, forming hanging villages where neighbours are only a few steps, and a steep drop, apart. Every path, field and rooftop connects in a careful web, turning the entire mountainside into a shared living system, shaped by necessity and trust. And as the day winds down, those same terraces become gathering places where simple meals, like rice sweetened with jaggery, are cooked slowly and shared. The rice cooks over crackling wood, while blocks of jaggery melt into a dark caramel syrup, and the smell drifts from roof to roof like a quiet announcement that evening has begun. On festival nights, sprouted wheat becomes diram fiti, a naturally sweet bread fried or baked, then dipped in apricot oil so fragrant it can fill a small stone room on its own. Nearby, a pot of thick wheat porridge is stirred for hours in slow circles, with men trading places at the handle, so the spoon never stops and the story never breaks. Some say if that pot is left alone before dawn, the next season will turn on you, so jokes, old songs, and even friendly arguments are used to keep the spoon moving. Between shifts, people gather over time tea and Hunza pizza, switching between local languages so easily that even the jokes sound different from one group to the next. Then, morning brings a new task. People climb tall Chilgoza pines for the most dangerous harvest in the entire valley, balancing on narrow branches just to reach the heavy cones. Once the cones are cut, they are dragged to open yards and flat roofs, spread in the sun and beaten against stone so the shells crack and seeds spill out in noisy bursts. Children kick and roll the drying cones to shake loose the last nuts, while older hands crouch nearby, picking out clean kernels and sweeping broken shell into dusty heaps. Dust and grit are chased away with quick basket throws, tossing the nuts into the air so light trash blows off, and the heavier seeds fall back like small, pale bullets. Some elders say you should never eat the first nut by yourself, so that first handful is passed around, turning a tiny snack into a quiet promise that no one is left out. The cleaned chilgoza is roasted, slipped into rice and breads, ground into pastes, or sold in town, and each handful can help a household push through the hardest weeks of winter. Looking up from the orchards, Baltit Fort appears almost unreal, a multi-storey cliff-top fortress that has watched over trade routes and tiny fields for centuries. Its wooden balconies lean out above a sheer drop, built on a packed mud and stone platform, tied into the rock so well that it has survived hard winters and repeated quakes. The whole building is also a marriage story. A Hunza ruler married a Baltistani princess, bringing craftsmen who reshaped the fort with Tibetan-style beams, flat roofs and painted pillars. Inside smoke-stained kitchens, grain rooms and steep stairways show how daily life and defence merged into a tight maze guarded by a single heavy door. After the ruling family left in the last century, the fort sagged and cracked until a long restoration brought its walls and floors back into shape. Now prayer calls, school voices, and market chatter drift up from below, mingling with footsteps on creaking boards and blurring the line between past and present. Just below the fort, Karimabad spreads out like a stacked village of terraces, apricot trees, and alleys so narrow that neighbours can talk window to window while touching both walls. Terraced homes climb the slope in tight rows, their flat roofs pulling double duty as extra rooms where fruit dries, grain is sorted, and the Karakoram peaks fill the view like a giant stone curtain. Between those houses, stone streets twist and squeeze, and you might hear Burushaski in one doorway, Waki in the next, with Urdu used in the middle so everyone understands. Apricot orchards press up to the walls, with nothing wasted, fruit eaten fresh, dried on rooftops, cooked into thick paste, and kernels crushed for oil used in food and on skin. Cooking spreads across homes. One fire boils wheat, another rolls chap shuro, while kids move pots up and down the steps like it's nothing. During this work, drums, clapping and storytelling bounce around the courtyards, with tales of mountains and ice told in whatever language the youngest listener follows best. But the great fortress here isn't even the oldest, as Altit fort stands on a knife edge of rock, older walls looking straight down to the Hunza river. Below that rock, the village of Altit packs into steep rows of stone homes and narrow lanes, stitched together by irrigation channels that drag glacier water right past the doorsteps. The fort controlled water and access in one stroke, watching the fields, tracking the paths, and sealing supply lines with a single gate. Inside, storage rooms, guard posts, and creaking wooden balconies lead to a small royal chamber where power once meant controlling every stair. At the centre, the oldest watchtower rises like a stone fist, its narrow slits framing only the approach tracks, fields below, and the pale river where trouble would first appear. Restoration used the same stone, timber and mud plaster as the village, making the fort feel less like a museum and more like an elevated version of the homes outside. From the forts, the valley climbs higher and drier, until the green gives way to bare ridges, and there, sitting in a bowl of brown rock, is Borith Lake, a small pool that somehow hums with life. With salty water and almost no vegetation, it looks more like a leftover meltwater pool than a recovering lake. Yet twice each year, long strings of migrating birds drop out of the thin sky to land on this quiet surface, using it as a high mountain rest stop before pushing on over the Karakoram. Around the shore, simple paths, stone walls, and a few scattered fields show how local life has learned to work with, not against, this odd pocket of water. For nearby families, the lake is both a mirror and a warning, as glacier melt shifts its shoreline, changing where crops grow and where mud takes over. On the upper slopes, a Himalayan Ibex can move in slow, careful zigzags, its hooves gripping tiny ledges with a calm that makes gravity look like a weak suggestion. Each hoof has a hard outer rim and a soft, rubbery centre, working like a natural climbing shoe that can cling to bumps barely wider than a finger. Long, curved horns weigh down its head like heavy tools, yet the neck and shoulders are so strong that it can still spring between rocks as if carrying nothing at all. Up here there is a strange rule. If a path feels safe and roomy for a wolf or a snow leopard, it is probably too open for an ibex to trust. When danger comes from below, The herd does the opposite of most animals and bolts straight up, turning what looks like a stone wall into a fast escape ramp. In harsh weather, these goats scrape through snow and loose rock to reach tough grass and small shrubs, turning scraps that other animals ignore into a full plate. Far overhead, a golden eagle circles the cliffs, looking for any small animal that slips or lets its guard down. It hardly beats its wings, using warm air rising from Hunza's valleys like an invisible lift that keeps it floating for a long, quiet patrol. But that calm can vanish in an instant. Once it picks a target, the glide turns into a plunge, wings folding tight, as the bird drops so fast that the animal below often never even looks up. Its heavy feet are armed with finger-length claws, powerful enough to lock onto a marmot, fox or young goat in an instant. When the hunt is over, it returns to the high ledges above the valley, where giant stick nests have been built up year after year and lined with softer plants where hungry chicks wait. People in these mountain villages sometimes lower their voices when one passes overhead, seeing it less as a threat and more as a sky guard that keeps smaller hunters in check. And despite its size, a golden eagle may hunt alone or team up with a mate, with one bird driving prey toward rock edges while the other waits in exactly the right place. From the orchards and flat roofs below, it can look small and calm, yet to a young ibex or ground animal, it is closer to a quiet flying rockfall. Down on the valley floor, the Karakoram highway clings to the mountainsides, an engineering marvel carved through some of the world's highest mountains. Built for a reliable all-weather trade route between Pakistan and China, crews blasted through rock, carved narrow ledges for trucks, and rebuilt again and again after landslides. One moment the highway hangs above roaring water on concrete pillars, the next it dives through tunnels and over bridges, twisting around every cliff and hazard. People began calling it the eighth wonder of the world, not as a compliment to its looks, but as a kind of shocked respect that a paved road even exists here at all. Villages along the route now cook for passing traffic, as well as themselves, with flatbreads, lentils, pilaf and sweet tea, in roadside rooms filled with horns, clinking cups, and mixed languages. Painted trucks crawl along the narrow asphalt, carrying orchard fruit and pork goods, while drivers swap music, news and weather at tiny tea stalls on hairpin bends. Follow the highway to its end, and you reach Khunjerab Pass, the highest paved international border crossing on Earth. Up here, the ground spreads out as a flat, pale shelf of snow and rock, where trucks line up by a simple border gate, and even a short walk can leave visitors puffing for air. Hard winds race across this open bowl, piling snow against the tarmac so often that the border runs on strict seasons and hours, and guards close it early when storms approach. Around the pass there are no orchards or big streets, just low buildings, patrol posts, and roadside stops where drivers warm up over tea, noodles and lentils as languages share tables. On valley side, a narrow turn-off leads towards Shimshal, where isolation is part of everyday life. For generations, the road in was a cliff trail and rope bridges, so flour, oil and even school books had to be walked in on backs, while waki songs kept groups in step. Stone houses and small fields cling to wide empty slopes, where life runs on sharing, grain, herding shifts, and winter stores of wheat, barley, potatoes, and dried milk. On these upper pastures, wild yaks dig through crusted snow to reach tough grass, revealing patches that look completely dead from below as their hidden buffet. Built for these conditions, their long shaggy coats hang almost to the ground, trapping warm air so well that ice can form on the outside, while the body underneath stays warm. Inside, big lungs and a slow, strong heartbeat let them breathe thin Shimshal air that would leave most visitors gasping after just a short walk. Lower down, broad hooves spread like soft-edged plates, gripping loose stones and ice, so each heavy step lands solid instead of sliding down the slope. Even the youngest ones adapt early. Calves learn this high life quickly, wobbling after their mothers along narrow paths until cliffs and cold wind feel as normal as a backyard field. For the people of Shimshal, these yaks are walking supplies, providing milk, butter, meat and wool from rough mountain grass, sustaining families through the long, cold months. One animal can haul cargo over high passes, pull heavy loads, and still provide nutritious milk at day's end. Around here, it's often called a tractor, coat, and pantry all in one. But they are not only work animals. Once a year, hard work turns to spectacle as herders race their strongest yaks over a high pass, a snow-kicking rodeo on the roof of the world. Beyond those grazing grounds rises a darker tower of rock and ice, K2, a sharp pyramid where pasture ends, and a far harsher kind of high world begins. Its flanks are near vertical walls of black rock and hanging ice, where a single crack can send ice blocks and rock fragments roaring down narrow gullies. Storms here build their own rules, as high winds wrap around the peak, slam into the ridges, and turn clear blue skies into whiteout in less time than it takes to brew tea. Far below, K2 Base Camp sits on broken glacier stones, a crowded patchwork of tents where cooks melt ice all day for water and serve hot tea and simple, heavy food to keep people warm. By evening, different languages mingle over steaming pots as workers and travellers trade stories of lost routes, lucky breaks, and the rare calm that follows the wind. Local staff read the glacier like a living thing, listening for small rumbles underfoot or distant cracks to judge when it is safe to move gear or when everyone should stay still. Up on those same cliffs, a snow leopard watches in silence, far more interested in wild goats than in any passing climber. Its fur is so perfectly patterned in grey and white that it can lie on a rock ledge and vanish, even when someone is staring straight at it. A wide nose gently warms the freezing air before it reaches the chest, so this cat can breathe calmly while moving where most lungs would feel like they are on fire. Its paws spread like soft snowshoes, letting it pad over crusted snow and ice that would swallow a regular boot in one step. That long, thick tail works like both scarf and balance bar, wrapping around the body for extra warmth and swinging out to steady each move along knife-edge ledges. In these valleys it stalks wild goats and sheep, creeping from rock to rock, then blasting into a short chase that can end with both hunter and prey sliding down an icy slope. It almost never targets people, but goat losses can trigger retaliation, driving new efforts to protect both herds and this rare cat. Cubs grow up in cliff dens, watching every careful step their mother takes, then copying her across drops where a single wrong move can be the end of a lesson. Hidden cameras and village stories show how quietly it shares these valleys with herders, moving mostly at night and melting away at the first hint of voices or barking dogs. Life that clings to these mountains shares this mountain chain with farming communities beneath the jagged skyline of Forces under the ground pushed this rock up, and then glaciers moving through Upper Hunza shaved and sliced it into narrow spires and steep faces. Those sharp stone towers look like broken cathedrals, cut from tough rock that stayed put while ice and rivers scraped softer layers away. On some evenings, only the tips sit in cloud and sunset light, so the valley is dim while the cones glow like a row of giant candles in the sky. Loose stone and sudden gusts near these walls keep drivers and walkers careful, because a calm blue sky can still send dust or rocks down toward the thin road. Stories in nearby homes compare these points to crowns and dragon teeth, and children try to name their favourite peak on the way to school or nearby fields. Below all that rock, rows of fields and orchards grow on narrow ledges, fed by channels that carry cold glacier water from the high ice right to each terrace. Evenings bring rooftop dinners of noodles, lentils and dried apricots, with waki and burushaski songs drifting across the valley. At the edge of the farms, the soft sound of water turns into creaks and cracks from the Passu Glacier, where frozen ground slowly crawls beneath the sharp peaks. What looks like a still white sheet is actually a slow conveyor belt of ice and rock, grinding the valley floor and sending cold meltwater toward the green terraces below. On warm days, the ice pops and booms like far-off drums, and elders joke that this is the mountain clearing its throat before shifting again. Every narrow water channel in the fields traces back to this frozen tongue, so a small change in its melt can decide how much wheat, potatoes, or fruit ends up in cooking pots. Icefalls and sudden surges can break those channels, so families walk the streams like careful plumbers, patching walls and cutting new paths with only shovels and stones. Old stories say the glacier likes respect and dislikes noise, so children are warned not to shout, throw rocks, or waste water when they play near its edge. Where that meltwater gathers into a faster, icy river, a crossing is needed, and the way over is a long, swaying line of planks and cables, known as the Hussaini suspension bridge. One look down through the gaps shows roaring grey water, and every gust of wind makes the whole span shudder like a nervous tightrope. Old stories tell how earlier bridges were torn away by floods, so many visitors murmur a quick wish for luck before they step off the bank and trust those cables. While guests edge forward for photos and shaky knees, local farmers stride across with sacks of grain or firewood, treating this dangerous bridge as a simple shortcut. Near the entrance, small stalls sell snacks, fruit juice, and hot tea, as stories fly about who froze after the first plank and who laughed all the way over. Once feet touch rock on the far side, the trail relaxes beside the river and leads toward fields, stone houses, and simple guest rooms in Passu village. Their grey, flat-roofed homes sit on small rises above the river, with thin green fields and pale dust tracks framed by the jagged teeth of the cones. From those homes, ice appears in two directions at once, one glacier pouring down the main valley, another curving in from the side, so the place feels squeezed between frozen waves. Beyond the houses, step terraces carry icy water down the slopes, and life follows its rhythm. Channels swell, shrink, and a single break can ruin a year's harvest. To fill the gaps, seasonal trade sends dried apricots, nuts and wool hats and down the road, and brings back tea, sugar, and tools from markets lower in the valley. Hush village repeats this glacier dance in its own way, timing crops and animals to melt water beneath some of the harshest summits. Stone houses and narrow terraces cling to the valley sides so close to big walls of rock and ice that climbers see Hush as the last small dot of normal life before danger starts. Families split their seasons between soil and snow, planting barley and potatoes on tight terraces, then joining expeditions to carry tents, stoves, and food into the high valleys. Courtyards turn into meeting spots where farmers, porters, and guides share tea and drums, swapping tales of storms, close calls, and lucky returns from high camps. What begins as careful life here with ropes and fields continues at Attabad Lake, where a single mountain collapse turned a blocked river into a glowing blue roadway for boats. That electric colour comes from rock flour, tiny stone dust ground up by glaciers, so the water looks painted bright blue against the dry brown cliffs around it. A rocky valley floor slowly changed into cool, still water, and fish moved in along the new channels and inlets made by this sudden natural dam. Waterbirds soon found this fresh stopover, gliding in to rest on the flat surface and hunting along steep edges where insects and small fish gather. Sheer walls plunge straight into the lake in many spots, so fallen trees, boulders, and chunks of old road now lie below the surface like a broken underwater maze. On cold, windy days, sharp waves slam against those rock faces, slowly carving tiny coves and ledges that give even more hiding places for plants and small animals. Beyond this long blue pool lies Askole, a speck of life at the edge of the high Karakoram, where the rock and ice roads of big expeditions truly begin. Stone houses and small fields sit in a ring of bare slopes and glacier valleys, so the village looks almost like a base camp that decided to grow its own crops. Locals split their year between hoe and trail, guiding routes, carrying loads, and running camp kitchens for teams heading toward K2, Broad Peak, and the huge glaciers beyond. Where the mountains finally relax their grip, the Deosai plains begin, a broad high plateau where bears, marmots and rivers share the same open field. For much of the year, this huge table of land is locked in snow and wind, but in the short warm season, it suddenly turns into miles of soft grass and tiny wildflowers. At this height the air is thin and nights stay cold, so only the toughest plants manage to grow, hugging the ground like green blankets to avoid being torn by the wind. As the snow melts, streams and bogs spring to life, giving insects, frogs and other small creatures a short season to feed, grow and breed. No roads cross these plains, only seasonal trails left by herds and flocks passing through during the brief summer. Old stories say this land of giants is watched by the plateau itself, rewarding those who move gently and punishing careless steps with sudden storms or surprise floods. In the middle, water gathers into a clear, still bowl called Shimshal Lake, reflecting the sky and distant peaks on a single shining surface. The lake sits so high that thin bands of ice can cling to its edges, even when the meadows around it are full of flowers, mixing summer colour with a cold white rim. Its fresh water feeds small streams and wet pockets nearby, creating a busy shoreline where hardy plants and tiny creatures race to grow during the brief warm season. Stories say the water keeps secrets and that loud shouting near the edge may wake the weather, swapping clear views for a sudden wall of mist or rain. As the winds turn colder, the surface stiffens, colours fade, and Shimshal Lake goes from bright mirror to pale lid, closing over until snow starts to melt again. Around this shifting bowl of ice and water, one of Deosai's most powerful residents still patrols the open grass and river cuts, the Himalayan brown bear. They're not grizzlies, but close cousins in the same brown bear family. Stocky, strong and built for mountain life, they are powerful diggers rather than fast runners. With a keen sense of smell and hearing, they can detect food or danger across the plains and spend most of their lives on the ground rather than in trees. Built for survival at this height, its fur grows thick and shaggy like an overstuffed coat, helping it stay warm on this high, windy table where nights feel more like a freezer than a field. When the short summer arrives, it eats almost anything it can find: roots, berries, insects, even scraps from other hunters. Every bite storing energy for what comes next. As the cold returns, it claims a den and spends weeks building fat reserves, becoming a walking pantry before a long winter sleep. Sharing that meadow, and often becoming the bear's breakfast, is a far smaller and more sociable resident. This is the golden marmot, a round golden brown ground squirrel that pops up all over Deosai like furry toast from a toaster. In warm months it stands upright to scan the grass, and one sharp whistle from a single animal can send an entire field of cousins vanishing in an instant. Each group lives in a maze of tunnels under the soil, with sleeping rooms, side exits, and little earth mounds that work as front steps and lookout towers. On calm days, they stretch out on those mounds with paws tucked in and eyes half closed, acting as if this high, windy world has nothing at all to worry about. The mood flips fast. One warning call, and dozens drop out of sight so quickly that the same patch of ground suddenly looks completely empty. During their short, busy season, they chew through tough grass and flowers, packing on fat to fuel months of cold, hidden sleep underground. Watching them feels like watching a tiny town at work. Guards, cleaners, playful youngsters, and grumpy elders, all sharing the same patch of high plain. As the marmots slip back underground, the water they drink keeps running on, down toward Turuk, a distant village of orchards, terraces, and stone lanes. Here, a community lives on glacier water, with narrow channels threading through apricot trees and grey stone houses, even as watchposts and fences cling to the cliffs above. During a war long ago, a new border cut through these mountains. and Turuk changed countries overnight. Some parents went to sleep in one nation and woke to find their children in another. One story tells of a mother who asked her son to stand at the border in white each week so she could spot him through binoculars and wave from across the line she could no longer cross. Long gaps between separated families make this green pocket feel almost frozen in time, unlike more connected Balti villages, such as those in Chigar Valley. It runs like a long chain of stone houses and orchards along a glacier-fed river, with old forts and towers placed where caravan guards once watched for dust clouds on the horizon. For centuries, traders moved through this corridor with pack animals carrying salt, wool, dried fruit and metals, and exchanged goods and news before heading into the harsher routes. Experienced caravan leaders learned to read the river like a warning sign, turning back when the water turned thick with silt or ice chunks sped past, knowing that meant trouble. Higher up, the valley, the green drops away to bare rock and pale sand, and the wind begins to shape the loose ground into rolling waves. That is where Chigar's orchard belt ends and the Sarfaranga cold desert begins, with sand dunes rising under snow peaks instead of under palm trees. Golden sand rolls into smooth waves, while icy wind drops from the ridges above. So eyes say, hot desert, but fingers and nose say, cold mountain. In some winters, snow settles right onto the dunes, turning the ground into white-top sand cakes that look more like a science prank than a real place. The dunes are leftovers from old rivers and glacier floods, loose grains parked on the valley floor and then carved into clean shapes by years of dry, high wind. On warm evenings, engines and hooves score fresh tracks across the sand as jeeps, motorbikes, horses and paragliders turn this high desert into an open-air arena. Nearby stalls hand out hot Balti dishes and sweet tea, so the smell of meat, apricot snacks and flatbread mixes with fuel, dust and cold air. Seasonal events now bring drums, loud music and full jeep rallies to the dunes, changing what once felt like an empty edge of Chigar into a giant playground of sand. On those cold upper ledges, the Himalayan snowcock's harsh calls bounce between walls of rock, filling empty cliffs with its own loud arena. The sound is sharp and ringing, more like a shrill kiki-kiki-kiki or kree-ak than a song, so it cuts through wind and carries far down into the valley. This big, sturdy bird spends most of the day picking its way over loose stones, pecking at grass shoots, seeds and tiny leaves, and digging out insects hiding between rocks. Feathers match the mountains, grey, brown and white stripes that break up its outline so well that the snowcock can stand still and almost vanish against the rocky slopes. When danger appears, it runs uphill on strong legs, then launches off the slope and glides down like a feathered sled into a long, easy descent through the air. Life at this height means thin air and fast-changing weather, so the snowcock keeps a low, heavy body, wide feet for grip, and thick plumage that works like a built-in winter coat. And lower down on the drier hillsides, another tough ground bird takes over patrol of the stones, the Chigar partridge, a smaller striped cousin of these high rock runners. Its bold face mask, red beak, and clean sidebars make it look almost dressed up. But it's a hard-working climber, built for scrambling over dry rock. Most days it moves along the slope on strong legs, pecking seeds, shoots and insects, then shoots uphill in sharp zigzags when a hunting shadow passes overhead. The call is famous, a loud, chuckling chuk-chuk-chukar that sounds like laughter bouncing off the cliffs and transforms bare hillsides into a kind of mountain comedy club. While these laughing patrols work the lower slopes, the valley floor holds the serene Chigar fort, a stone Baltit mountain palace built on rock like a fortress, but lived in as a home. While these laughing patrols work the lower slopes, the valley floor holds the serene Chigar fort, a stone Baltit mountain palace built on rock like a fortress, but lived in as a home. From outside, it stacks up in sharp levels of stone and carved wood, with overhanging balconies and narrow doors that once had to block trouble as well as winter wind. Inside, royal rooms feel close and warm, with low beams, painted ceilings and carved pillars that seem made to calm nerves during long storms when the whole valley rattles. Guides sometimes share gentle ghost tales here, saying old rulers still walk the corridors, more curious than scary, as if they are checking who now sleeps in their rooms. Every corner shows smart mountain design, from small windows that hold in heat, to raised lofts for food, to high watch points where guards once tracked caravan lines below. Today the fort works as a historic hotel and museum, where guests curl up in restored royal suites, run a hand along walnut floors, and wake to stone walls glowing in first light. Back in Upper Hunza, another high mountain community has shaped its own answers to snow, ice and steep ground in the stone-built lanes of Gulkin village. Fields here sit like green patches on bare slopes, fed by narrow channels that carry meltwater from the Gulkin Glacier, the village's lifeline in a dry, high place. On some days, the whole valley feels like it is on the move, as people and pack animals cross long, swaying bridges above loud, grey rivers to reach far fields and summer pastures. Elders often talk about the glaciers as if they are light sleepers, so they watch ice, clouds, and the sound of water very closely, reading tiny changes like others read city signs. When people here look past their roofs, trees, and footpaths, they see Rakaposhi towering over forests and houses, as if the whole valley was built at its feet. What shocks the eye is not only its height, but the way the mountain drops in one huge sweep down to the river, like a frozen slide with no steps or shelves to slow it. Stand at the bottom on a clear day, and you can trace a single line of rock and snow climbing almost 4 miles in front of you, as if the ground has been pulled straight into the sky. Locals call it the Shining Wall because the snow flares white, gold, or pale pink as the light shifts, and the entire face glows like a giant screen. That same steep wall can send ice and rocks racing downward in storms and avalanches, so people keep homes and fields on safer ledges and pay close attention to the mountain's mood. Even so, life goes on under this giant, with kids walking to school, farmers working orchards, and visitors craning their necks until they almost lose balance from staring up. At another point along these high walls rises Kaplu, where Balti kings once used stone homes and grand halls to control trade routes and village harvests. Narrow alleys weave between stacked stone houses and storerooms, built close together, so this mountain town could stay warm, share water, and guard its paths. For traders, Kaplu worked like a high checkpoint, where pack animals, salt, dried fruit, and news all passed through the same tight courtyards. Power showed up not in big speeches, but in simple things. How much grain reached the terraces, how full the market felt, and how often drums and flutes played on festival nights. At the centre of that old kingdom stands Kaplu Palace, a royal residence where Tibetan, Kashmiri and Balti influences meet, beneath a long balcony overlooking the valley. From outside it looks almost like a tall wooden tower anchored in stone, with irregular windows and stacked verandas shaped by Balti and Tibetan builders. Step inside and the mood changes to Kashmiri-style detail, cusped arches, painted ceilings, and carved doors that turn small rooms into something closer to jewellery boxes. A favourite story says the site was chosen by rolling a heavy stone downhill and building exactly where it stopped, as if the palace itself had to pick its place. From this height, the balcony feels like a front row seat to Nagar Valley, where giant mountains crowd around tiny farms in a very tight, rocky bowl. Grey cliffs drop almost straight to glacier rivers that twist through the valley floor, fed by ice flowing down from high peaks. Isolated settlements perch on small ledges or cling to narrow spurs with long gaps of empty rock between each cluster of homes. This isolation comes from steep cliffs, wild glacier rivers, and winter snows that make it hard to build, farm, or travel anywhere except a few safe spots. Over the terraces and river noise, the Himalayan griffon vulture drifts into view, riding invisible ladders of warm air and scanning the ground with calm, steady eyes. Its wings are so wide that, from below, the bird can look almost as long as a small car, yet above the valley it hardly flaps, just tilts and glides like a very relaxed paper airplane. Instead of chasing live prey, it watches and waits, then drops down to feed on dead animals, quietly clearing up what other creatures leave behind. The pale, almost bare head and long neck may seem strange, but that clean skin helps the bird stay less messy when it reaches far inside a carcass. Away from a meal, they perch on cliffs most of the time, though they also crowd onto bare tree branches near good feeding areas. They are rarely alone. These birds often gather in loose groups, circling together in the sky or roosting side by side like a sleepy flying club that only wakes up when it smells dinner. Himalayan griffon vultures can look intimidating because they are so large and often gather around dead animals, but they almost never bother people and prefer to stick to their cleanup work. Even the expert of flying has dangers, as storms, tall wires, and poisoned meat can all turn easy soaring into sudden trouble. Down at the valley floor, beside the Great Highway, sits a settlement that may be the oldest of them all. This is Ganesh, a tight knot of stone lanes and towers built right on the old Silk Road, where caravans once checked in for safety before daring the next stretch of mountain. From outside, it looks like a stone puzzle pressed into the slope, with watchtowers, wooden mosques, shared courtyards, and alleys so narrow that 2 loaded donkeys could barely pass. Along the same chain of guarded valleys, Skardu Valley spreads out as a busy gateway, where roads, rivers and airstrips all feed Karakoram expeditions. On all sides of the valley, mountains rise in a near full circle, so the town feels ringed by walls of rock and snow. Down on the floor, the upper Indus and its side streams weave between cold sand dunes, green side valleys, and blue lakes, so a short drive can pass through desert, river, and alpine meadow, all within the same giant bowl. It gets called Little Tibet because the Balti language comes from Old Tibetan, and many roofs, courtyards, and place names still reflect that high plateau legacy. For climbers and porters, Skardu works like a mountain port, a place to repair boots, sort ropes, and trade last-minute weather gossip before heading toward remote base camps. And tucked just uphill from this busy gateway, Satpara Lake waits in its own rocky cup, holding clear meltwater that keeps Skardu's taps and fields alive while mirroring the hills above. On calm days, the surface turns into a giant mirror, so boats, clouds, and whole ridgelines seem to float twice, once in air and once in water. The view feels peaceful, yet every drop is busy, moving through pipes and channels into kitchens, canals, and orchards across the valley. One local tale says the lake gets angry if treated badly, so visitors are warned not to shout, litter, or waste water, as if the quiet blue bowl were listening. A short ride away, blue water suddenly ends and pale sand begins, where the Katpana cold desert lays out its cool dunes under snow-capped peaks. It feels like two opposite worlds glued together, with soft sand underfoot and icy mountains straight ahead. Katpana is one of the few deserts on Earth where snow can settle on the dunes, so winter and desert share the same ground. That unusual mix comes from altitude. High above sea level, the thin air sharpens every ridge and shadow across the sand. On windy days, sand races along the ground like tiny waves, hissing around boots and tyres. People who walk here leave crisp tracks along the ridges, only for the wind to begin erasing them minutes later. In some places, the dunes sit so close to the Indus River that blue water, white peaks, and desert ripples fill the same view. Light reshapes the scene throughout the day, turning the sand golden at sunrise, pale at noon, and soft grey by evening. Even here, small clumps of grass and low shrubs cling to sheltered hollows, making use of every scrap of meltwater and rain. In a greener corner of the north, Minapin village waits beside forests and a bright glacier river under the huge face of Rakaposhi. Pine slopes, fruit trees, and thin farm strips wrap around the lanes, so one side of a path can show dark woods, while the other points straight at ice and bare rock. Houses lean on thick stone walls and flat roofs, with wood-lined rooms, small sun-facing windows, and storerooms piled high to get through long, snowy winters. Daily life moves along shared paths to water channels, over meals of slow-cooked stews and flatbreads, and into evenings where voices and songs bounce between close courtyards. Closer to the wide river bends, Skardu city turns village paths into paved streets, where trucks load up for long runs toward Baltistan's peaks. Stone houses, concrete blocks and shop fronts climb the slopes above the upper Indus, so one lane ends in a crowded bazaar and the next in a sudden view of sand, water and mountains. The city speaks with many voices at once, Balti songs on radios, prayer calls over rooftops, and expedition briefings in different languages at the same cafe tables. Skardu city is one of the few places on Earth where almost every major Karakoram expedition checks in before heading toward high base camps. Military roads and rough side tracks twist out of town in every direction, carrying jeeps past fuel pumps, gear stalls, and tea houses that keep the city moving. On busy mornings, school kids and farmers share the streets with climbers, making final plans for weeks among ice and rock. Ropes, gas canisters, porters, permits, and last-minute weather gossip all pass through this mountain hub, the main gateway to some of the world's hardest climbs. Watching all of this from high above, Kharpocho Fort clings to its cliff, old stone walls looking down on the Indus, and Skardu like a balcony built to guard the whole basin. A Balti king chose this brutal rock on purpose, turning it into a king of forts, where attackers had to fight uphill while defenders controlled every path into the valley. For centuries it stood as a shield against powerful neighbours, a place where wars for Baltistan's throne were planned, while the rivers far below carried on as if nothing was happening. Up close, the walls feel raw and tough, with heavy stone and packed earth stacked straight out of the mountain, and narrow slits cut so archers could watch the world and barely be seen. A short way from the city, the harsh rock and dust you see from the fort turn into calm paths, bright flowers, and storybook-style chalets at Shangri-La Resort. The resort takes its name from the novel Lost Horizon and was built as a real-world mountain refuge, wrapped around a heart-shaped patch of water. Its most famous dining spot sits inside a crashed aircraft fuselage, where Balti favourites like chapshuro and apricot treats share the menu with comfort food from Pakistan's big cities. Around the shore, Balti, Urdu and English often mix in the same conversations, so kids growing up nearby learn to jump between languages almost as easily as they switch games. Nearby farmers now sell fruit, vegetables and dairy to the resort, and small mountain plots supply guests from far beyond the Karakoram. After trampling and litter began to damage the gardens, entry fees and simple conduct rules helped protect the grounds and reinforced a sense of shared responsibility. The pagoda-style building often acts like a tiny culture stage, with Balti songs floating over the water, while visitors from other regions clap along even if they don't catch every word. Wheelchair ramps and flat walking tracks circle the lakefront, a rare sight in such a remote corner of Pakistan, built on the belief that mountain views should be accessible to everyone. As the resort grew, nearby communities took on new roles, shifting from high-altitude farming and portering toward cooking, music, and small shopkeeping as mountain-style hospitality work. From the paths, dark higher hills rise beyond the resort, shifting the mood from a calm holiday setting to something wilder and more mysterious. That shift in mood draws many onward, leaving Shangri-La's comfort behind for the cooler, quieter Upper Kachura Lake. The lake hides between cliffs and trees like a giant mountain pool, and even loud groups tend to drop their voices once they reach the shore. In summer, swimmers talk about the shock of the cold water, saying one jump is enough to wake every muscle in the body. Some families tell children that if you drop a wish gently into the surface without splashing, the ring of hills keeps it safe, so kids treat the lake like a quiet wishing well. On calm days, small wooden boats slide across the clear water, while fish below flick in and out of sight like tiny silver sparks. Tall trees around the shore block most outside noise, creating a quiet outdoor room edged by rock and foliage. In that hush, it is easier to spot dark shapes on the rocks, where the great cormorant dries its wings and then vanishes under the surface in sudden sharp dives for fish. A long neck, hooked bill, and webbed feet give this bird a distinctive silhouette, and in good light its feathers flash with a subtle blue-green sheen. Around here, it acts like a feathered submarine, using strong webbed feet to swim under the cold water while its hooked beak snaps at fast-moving fish. Under the surface, it can stay down for long spells, weaving after fish with a long, low body that moves more like a sleek dart than a puffed-up bird. That hunting style comes with a trade-off. Unlike most water birds, its feathers absorb water, helping it sink fast, but forcing it to dry its wings on the rocks between dives. When the fishing is done, they gather in noisy colonies on rocks, cliffs and trees, drying wings, nesting and squabbling over the best perches. They eat mainly fish, but they can also take crabs, small crustaceans, insects, frogs, and even the occasional duckling or other small water animal when the chance appears. Even so, this bird watches the water with great patience. By the time a splash catches the eye, the fish is usually already gone. That routine is becoming harder to keep. Engines, boats and trash disturb resting sites and muddy the clear water cormorants rely on to hunt. Sharing that airspace is a far more imposing fisherman, the Pallas's fish eagle. Over here it glides with long, broad wings and a heavy body, wearing a dark brown coat on top and a pale, almost cream-coloured belly that makes it look very different from the usual eagle. Its huge hooked beak and powerful yellow legs are built for fishing and snatching fish from the surface in a single crushing grab. This eagle can steal a fish right out of another bird's beak. Even ducks and young geese have to watch out when its shadow passes over the lake. Once the hunt is over, the eagle often drifts inland above steep valleys, passing over tiny footpaths, stacked fields, and tight clusters of stone houses in Machulu village. It sits in a hard-to-reach side valley, far from main tourist routes and big markets, where most survival needs are still handled within the community itself. The village looks almost hand-carved into the slope, with stone homes stacked like steps, flat roofs extending living space, and narrow lanes threading between terraces and animal pens. Because water is everything here, rules are strict and shared work is constant. Neighbours repairing broken channels together, since one blockage can dry out entire stretches of terrace. Not far off, the dry mountain terrain suddenly produces a burst of green and falling water. Manthuka waterfall crashes down from glacier-fed streams high above, where hard cliff rock becomes a roaring wall of spray that cools the whole valley. In warmer months, local families say the waterfall speaks louder as faster snow and ice melt in Baltistan's high peaks, send more water over the edge in a thicker, whiter curtain. Streams flowing away from this drop run toward nearby meadows and fields, so this dramatic fall also helps feed grass, crops and livestock lower in the valley. The same meltwater that powers this waterfall also feeds the wider valleys, linking Baltistan's high drops to Gulmit's careful farming culture. Here, glacier melt shapes everything, forming the backbone of farming and survival, with canals allocated by rotation, so each household knows when its turn begins and ends. Seasonal farming runs on tight weather windows, with families shifting between pruning trees, clearing terraces, and maintaining canals, guided more by snow lines and river colour than by machines. Higher up the valley, the maze of channels and fields gives way to a simple sweep of grass and wooden huts at fairy meadows, set directly under the icy ramparts of Nanga Parbat. This alpine clearing sits in a narrow sweet spot where cold glacier streams, dark pine forest and soft grass can all share the same slope without freezing solid or drying out. The name Fairy Meadows was given by European climbers who thought this flat green patch below such a huge mountain looked magical, like a real-life fairy tale lawn. Locally it is still known as Jute, but visitors keep using the fairy name because the mix of forest, meadow and giant ice wall feels more like a storybook picture than a normal campsite. Glacier melt runs through small streams across the grass, nourishing trees and flowers, while most eyes stay fixed on the towering peaks above. The thick pine belt around the meadow acts like a shield, softening strong winds and sudden weather from higher up so small plants, insects and birds can survive in this high, cold zone. In heavy storms, the ground can flood fast, and a friendly resting place becomes a shallow basin that reveals how quickly glacier water can reshape the mountains. Wooden cabins and simple fences stay low to the ground, built so winter snow and fierce winds pass over them instead of tearing them apart. From this green balcony beneath one of Earth's tallest mountains, nearly every trail and viewpoint looks toward Nanga Parbat's north face, where huge ice slopes and steep rock walls dominate the horizon. The main viewpoints line up like front row seats, each framing a different feature: an ice dome, a sharp ridge, or a near vertical wall that seems to drop into space. On clear days, the height difference between meadow and summit is so extreme that many visitors need a moment to believe what they're seeing. From these viewpoints, it's clear why Nanga Parbat is called the Killer Mountain. Its sheer walls force climbers into avalanches, ice cliffs, and extreme exposure from the start. At certain angles, pale lines on the snow mark old avalanche tracks, thin scars where huge slabs once broke loose and fell thousands of feet in only a few minutes. Weather here changes fast, and a calm viewpoint can turn into a front row seat for cloud banks racing up the face, hiding and then revealing hanging glaciers like a slow natural light show. At dusk, the last sun often hits only the top of Nanga Parbat, leaving the lower ridges in shadow, so the peak seems to glow above a darker valley like a separate world in the sky. In full darkness, the viewpoints become listening posts, where distant cracks and rumbles of shifting ice carry down from the wall while the meadow below stays still. Down in the gentler ground below that wall moves the great survivor of the animal world, the red fox, padding through fairy meadows in search of tiny things to eat. Seen up close, its slim body, sharp nose and big fluffy tail make it perfect for slipping between rocks and roots, with the tail acting like a balance bar as it weaves through grass and trees. Even here, survival depends on precision. Hearing is its main superpower, letting it catch the faint rustle of a mouse under snow or turf and lock onto that sound like living radar. The famous fox jump is pure design genius, a high leap and nose-first dive into the ground that has worked so well it has barely needed changing for ages. Red fox will take whatever the land offers: mice, small birds, insects, fallen fruit, even rubbish, so Fairy Meadows becomes just another stop on a giant menu. Thick fur and a curling tail help it handle cold nights, with the tail wrapped over its nose like a built-in scarf that traps warm air around its face. When pups arrive, adults hide them in dens and may shift them between burrows if danger comes close, showing that this crafty hunter is also a careful guardian. But the true king of these cliffs is a bird so bizarre, it sounds invented. Called the bearded vulture, it is a huge, long-winged raptor with a dark mask, shaggy throat feathers, and plumage of often stained rusty orange. From high cliff ledges it rules the air, launching into long, silent glides over glacier valleys without much flapping. These same heights serve as nesting grounds, giving it safe vantage points above most mountain danger. With its sharp red eyes and shadowed face, it is built for precision, yet its role in the ecosystem is far less fierce than it appears. The bird survives on bone, one of the few species capable of digesting it as a primary food source. Rather than tearing flesh, it performs a brutal feeding ritual, lifting bones into the sky and dropping them onto rock until they shatter. Inside its body, swallowed stones act like natural grinders, helping break down the fragments it consumes. Beyond survival mechanics, it has a bold habit, bathing in iron-filled mud that stains its feathers in bold, rusty tones, possibly as a signal of status. Long-term pairs often work together, sharing territory and defending cliff zones where bones and carcass remains are reliably found. Meanwhile, lower in the forest, a burst of living colour, the Himalayan monal, flashes blues, greens and copper through the trees. Around fairy meadows and nearby forests, the bird moves between shaded woodland and sunlit slopes, adjusting its position along the hillside to balance cold air and bright exposure. Males look almost unreal, with a metallic green crest, shining neck and rainbow body, while females stay brown and speckled, camouflaged among leaves and rocks when danger passes. A strong, curved beak and powerful legs let them dig through hard mountain soil and leaf litter, pulling out hidden food beneath the surface. That search feeds a flexible diet of roots, shoots, berries, seeds, and insects gathered from forest ground and frozen patches alike. During mating season, males step into clear openings and perform deliberate displays, crests raised, feathers flared, short stomping walks, and slow turns that catch every angle of light. When snow deepens, they shift toward forest edges and rocky shelves, working thin ground layers where digging is still possible. Beyond these trees, the route reaches Hopa, a cliffside village that spends every season carefully negotiating with advancing and collapsing ice. Here, terraced fields cling to slopes above the glacier, where planting shifts as ice advances or retreats, and cracks and rumblings are read like a second weather forecast. Shared rules govern water and grazing, deciding which terraces to use, which cliff paths are safe, and how to repair canals after ice or landslides. Over in the old kingdom of Kaplu, Chachan Mosque stands with wooden pillars and stone walls that mix local craft with styles carried in by traders from distant Islamic cities. Built in the late 14th century, it watched an entire valley shift from Buddhist temples to Muslim prayer, earning its name, the Miraculous Mosque, among local families. Its two-storey timber and mud frame was designed to handle heavy snow and restless ground, using stacked wood and packed clay to keep prayers going through long, freezing winters. Step inside and patterns emerge: Persian-style beams, Tibetan painted panels, and motifs from Kashmir and Central Asia, sharing one small mountain space. Across the Nalta Valley, wooden homes, prayer spaces, and small schools huddle near the tree line, keeping everyday life going, while peaks and forests shut them in for much of the year. This is one of the few Karakoram valleys where thick pine woods grow under sharp summits, forming a pocket of shade, needles and bird calls in a harsh mountain zone. Winter storms can pile snow more than 10 feet high, blocking rough roads and leaving villages to move through narrow cut paths and doorways dug out of packed white walls. Glacier-fed rivers and springs thread through the trees, feeding a chain of alpine lakes that shine blue and green, each pool shaped by the moss, plants and roots around it. In summer, fields appear wherever the ground allows, and families race to grow crops and cut fodder before cold returns and shuts the valley off again. Wildlife slips between trunks and rocks here, using the forest as shelter in a region where many other slopes hold little more than bare stone and ice. Parents often warn children to stay quiet near loose scree and steep sides, knowing that one careless shout or step can send gravel and boulders tumbling toward the streams. As the trees thin and the valley opens, all this ice, wood and bright mountain light gather around one small basin of water, the colour-shifting surface of Satrangi Lake. Its name means seven-coloured, a reflection of how the water moves through shifting tones of green, turquoise and vivid blue, as light algae and submerged plants change with the day. Here, glacier melt packed with minerals feeds the basin, and fine particles suspended in the water bend and scatter sunlight, transforming ordinary daylight into a natural palette. The result is a surface that never settles, changing not only with weather and season, but with the smallest shifts in sun angle. On clear days, pine trunks and sharp peaks reflect so cleanly that the lake appears doubled, with one world above and another mirrored beneath. In heavy snow seasons, reaching this basin can mean walking past banks of packed white well above head height, until the path suddenly opens to this pocket of unfrozen colour. Scattered through that forested valley, small communities line the streams, trading long, harsh winters for short bursts of growing season and clear mountain skies. Here, Nalta Valley villages share something rare for the Karakoram: real pine woods around their doors, with firewood, shade and bird calls. Houses, schools and small mosques stay low and sturdy, built from stone and timber to withstand packed snow and shifting slopes. Fields appear wherever the ground allows, producing narrow strips of potatoes, barley and vegetables that disappear once heavy snow locks the valley for months. When warmth briefly returns, life accelerates. Soil is worked quickly, crops are planted, and fruit is gathered before the cold closes in again. When the snow walls rise, homes shift function, with upper rooms used as storage spaces packed with dried fruit, flour, and animal feed for the long sealed season. Food habits mirror this cycle. Light, fresh meals in summer give way to dense breads, slow stews, and preserved goods designed to sustain energy through freezing air. Community life also depends on careful water sharing, with stream flow divided between terraces so every field receives its turn before supply is reduced. Between pine shadows and loose scree, the beech marten moves through the rocky forests around Nalta Valley villages like a late-night patrol. Slim and flexible, it has a long body and bushy tail that lets it twist through stones, fallen trunks, and narrow forest gaps with ease. When darkness settles, it takes over the still surroundings, slipping through cracks in rock piles, wood stacks and field edges in search of food. Feeding widely, it hunts mice, small birds, eggs and other small animals, and makes the forest floor and human edges a shifting hunting ground. Its agility allows it to enter spaces too tight for larger predators, from tree hollows to barns and stone clusters, where it moves almost unseen. Still, vigilance is constant, as it must watch for foxes, birds of prey, and humans who protect grain stores, and chickens with traps and barriers. Beyond hunting, it plays a quieter ecological role, helping control rodent populations and spreading seeds through the berries it consumes. Once the night patrol fades back into the trees, the Karakoram feels still on the surface, though the valleys below continue their hidden motion. This is Karakoram Range, a land of hidden wonders and remarkable architectural marvels. Now, if you don't want to miss the most unreal wonders of Yukon, check out this video.